Hi guys, so as promised, I'm going to make a short video on the Joanna Hogg event that Tom Hiddleston attended in Paris on the 18th of March. So yeah, it was 10 days ago. I didn't have time to do this before, so I don't know if many people will be watching this, but I said I would do it, so I'm doing it. So a lot of it is from memory because I did not record anything. I know some people did. I don't know if anyone has posted any of these videos, but I did take notes during Tom's speech in the evening, and I tried to write down everything from memory as I was going home in the evening, or rather the next day on the train, in fact, to be honest. So you'll have to excuse me if sometimes maybe I've forgotten a few things, and I will be paraphrasing Tom's and Joanna's words a bit. So first I'll talk about the masterclass that Joanna Hogg gave in the afternoon, and then I will talk about the Archipelago screening and the speech that Tom gave and the questions that they answered afterwards. So before going to the evening event, I also attended the masterclass that Joanna gave in the afternoon, and it lasted for 2 hours, and it was very interesting. They showed various clips from her works, and film students from a school in Paris asked her some very interesting questions, and they also took a few questions from the audience. So they started by showing her end of studies film, which was set in 1987, and it was called Caprice, or Caprice, I don't know, it's a French word. So it starred a very young and gorgeous Tilda Swinton, actually credited as Matilda Swinton, so that was before she became famous, I suppose. And I did not know that Joanna Hogg had actually discovered Tilda Swinton as well as Tom Hiddleston. It was a very strange little film, but it was very good, it was funny. The protagonist was a girl called Lucky, who really loves fashion magazines, and as she's about to buy the latest issue of her favorite magazine, which is called Caprice, she's sucked into the pages of the magazine, so it becomes very surreal. It's a surreal exploration of the various sections of the magazine. Fashion, adverts for makeup and perfume and so on. And at the same time, it's a criticism of the way these magazines try to convince women that they can buy confidence by spending money on cosmetics and other products. But it's done in a fun way, it's not moralistic or anything. And Lucky meets lots of people. She gets successive makeovers throughout the movie to match the aesthetic of the various pages. She meets a 1960s pop star surrounded by 1960s dancers, almost like, La La Land from a musical. And the guy is extremely rude to her, so she's kind of disillusioned. She's not very happy with her experience. They keep asking her for money, which she doesn't have, so she realizes that it's actually not a very nice world at all. In the end, she asks to see the chief editor, and the chief editor tells her that she's been selected to be on the cover of the magazine, but she refuses and runs away. So that was the film. I don't know if it's available anywhere else, but it was quite interesting to see it. And then after that, they showed several clips from several of Joanna's films, and she talked about her career, how she became a filmmaker, and so on. So she explained that after finishing film school, she spent 20 years working for television before making her first feature film at the age of 47. So that's quite an interesting career. And she explained that for her, doing work for television was like a second film school. She felt she still had more to learn after film school, but it ended up lasting much longer than she had planned. She did not think she would be working for TV for 20 years, but she explained that, TV can be a bit of a trap, because it allows you to make money, and therefore as long as you keep being given work, it's hard to decide to leave and go and make movies, which might not actually bring you any money. So there's this kind of job security that she had there that was difficult to just leave behind. Then she explained, she talks about Unrelated. They showed the clip in which Oakley and Anna discuss her sex life with her husband, basically. The question of, getting married to one person, are we meant to live like this and stuff. So they showed that scene. She explained that she had written a full script, in fact, for Unrelated, but then she changed her mind while they were shooting, because she felt increasingly frustrated by the way this piece of paper was standing between her and what was really going on, that that is to say the actors and the chemistry that they had, whatever. So she decided overnight to just throw away the script and only give the actors a few directions to let them improvise the dialogue and see where it went. So that's what happens in that scene, the scene when Oakley and Anna are talking. Is apparently almost completely improvised. They didn't really know where they were going with that. And interestingly, she explained that it was the professional actors who were most uncomfortable with this decision to throw away the script and work mostly with improv, and especially the older cast. And she said that the non-professional, she always has non-professionals acting in her movies mixed with professional actors. And she said the non-professionals actually did not mind having to improvise. And she also said that Tom in particular really went with it, really had a great time. And Kate, who was playing Anna, also loved it, being a former actress who had decided to stop acting. So she liked experiencing and working in a different way. But the actors playing the parents apparently it was a bit more difficult for them. And she actually said that the crew also had problems with it, and some crew members even left the film. Then she explained as well that she does not necessarily give every cast member the same amount of information, because sometimes she feels they don't need the same amount. For example, on Unrelated, the main actress playing Anna did not know where the story was going, while the other actors did, so that's interesting. She says that sometimes after shooting a scene that takes a lot of effort, you realize that the film is actually better off without the scene, and you have to take the hard decision of letting go of it. She isn't overly attached to her ideas, she said. If she finds out that they don't work, after all, she just lets go. And for example, she said that in Unrelated, they had shot scenes at the Palio. It's in Italy, so there was this big event taking place, and she said it had been quite difficult to shoot. It was supposed to be kind of a centerpiece of the film, and yet eventually they decided not to include it in the film. And she felt it was better to just only show the aftermath, as they did. You see them after they attended the event, but you don't actually see the big event taking place. And she felt it worked much better that way. Then she was asked about how she wrote, and she explained that she writes her ideas on notebooks, moleskin notebooks with not many pages, so she can fill about 10 of them. And in the end, she has to type everything on the computer because obviously she says, well, she cannot give her handwritten notes to the cast and crew, but she also says she does not really enjoy that part of the process because she dislikes seeing her script in print. And in the end, usually she has about 30 pages once it's typed on the computer, so it's like a short story that she has. And she also said that one of her crew members actually joked that sometimes after ditching the script completely, she had actually gone back to almost exactly what she had written in the original script. So that's an interesting remark, that she thought she had completely let go of it, but she went back to the original ideas in a way. So they also showed some images from the film which I haven't seen, so it was a bit more difficult for me to remember everything there, but a film called The Souvenir 2, in which she shows a woman actually making a film about her own experience with a toxic guy, and apparently there's a mise en abîme there because it's also her telling the story of something that happened in her life. So they reconstructed her own old apartment for the film. And that was quite an interesting experience for her. So she was asked by the students, I think, about the importance of places in her work. And so she talked about how strange it was to reconstruct her own apartment. And it was strange because even though it was filmed in an airline hangar, she thought, once she was on set, even though she thought initially that she didn't have a very good memory, once she was there, she felt that her body remembered things. For example, she said that once she found herself in the room that was supposed to reproduce her kitchen, she realized it was wrong because it felt much more spacious than she remembered. So she had a kind of like a bodily or embodied memory of the place. And finally, the last thing I remember from the masterclass is that she said it was a strange experience because it seemed like by reliving this experience, she was actually recreating memories, and that these kind of fake memories in a way kind of substituted themselves to her real memories of that time. So it was a very interesting event, and Joanna was very interesting to listen to. I always really enjoy attending masterclasses. I haven't seen a lot, but I think it's just the second one actually, but I'm going to see another one next week with a Spanish director, and it's always fascinating, in fact, to listen to them talking about their work. So now I'll move on to the evening event, which was the one that Tom Hiddleston attended. So it was a screening of Archipelago. It took place in, just like everything else in this Joanna Hogg event, it was a whole week of showing films by Joanna Hogg. It was in the Centre Pompidou in Paris. And so Tom came, while we were already inside the theatre. We were all seated inside the movie theatre, and suddenly he arrived with Zawe. In fact, I did not expect Zawe to be there, so that was a very pleasant surprise. And so there was an introduction by the guy from the museum, from the festival. And then I didn't take any notes during this introduction, but of course he paid lots of compliments to Tom and said a lot of very nice things. And then Tom said thank you, and he started by speaking in French, in fact, and his French is actually pretty good. But obviously he probably had prepared for this, and once he has to go freestyle in French, he's not so comfortable. So he then apologized and said that he would have to continue in English because he could not speak French for the whole evening. And he then spoke in English for a very long time, and suddenly he stopped to apologize to the interpreter, which made everyone laugh. Because he realized suddenly that she was trying to memorize everything he was saying in order to translate it afterwards as soon as he stopped. And I have to say, this interpreter, she was the same woman who was also interpreting for Joanna Hogg during the masterclass, and she was absolutely amazing. She had mad skills. As someone who speaks both languages, I did not need the translation, so I just had fun trying to see if she was actually translating everything properly. And initially, when I saw how long she let Joanna Hogg go on, I thought, well, no way she's going to translate all of that. She's going to give us a summary or the gist of what she said, but she's never going to remember everything. And actually she did. Once Joanna Hogg stopped, she just started talking, and just as if she were Joanna Hogg herself, and just really just repeating every single thing she had said in perfect French without never any mistakes. It was absolutely crazy. And at one point, Joanna did the same as Tom. Actually, she spoke for very long, and then suddenly she stopped and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how long I had been speaking. How are you going to translate all of this?" And the interpreter was like, "No problem." And then she starts giving us the whole thing, and then she stops and everyone claps because we were just so impressed. So in the evening, you may have seen this video with Tom apologizing, and that was the context. He was saying sorry to the interpreter because she had to translate all the things he had said. And she did it again, perfectly. And so he was very impressed, and everyone was like clapping again and saying, wow, impressive memory. So to go back to Tom, so he, during his speech, I actually took notes on my little notebook. So he remembered that when he was at RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, in his early 20s in London, he was trained to understand how to perform classical work on stage, like Shakespeare, like Chekhov, for example. But he still, in spite of this, he already loved cinema too. It's just that he said he saw that as an almost impossible thing, that he would one day maybe end up in a movie. He said it felt impossible to imagine that. And he explained that he met Joanna Hogg only 2 weeks after finishing drama school, and together they made Unrelated, which was his first film. And he was only 24 years old, so he said, well, he was very young, and he joked that at least he felt very young at the time. And then 3 years later, they worked again together on Archipelago, so the one that they showed on the 18th of March in Paris. So he talked about how Joanna Hogg made him discover that the camera is really cinema's principal tool. And then he explained why he believed that. He said, the camera is unflinchingly honest. It sees the world as it is. He said that sometimes you hear people say that children and animals are so honest because they can't be dishonest. And he said the same is true about an actor in front of a camera, basically. if a character, so that's almost a direct quote, I wrote this down. He said, if a character is free, the camera will see the character's freedom. If a character is dishonest, the camera will see the dishonesty. If a character is trapped, the camera will see the trap. If a character is sad, the camera will capture the sadness, and so on. And so he said, and that's also a quote, the mission of a film actor is to seem, if not be, as natural as the wind in the trees. And he said that acting was about trying to be honest in the experience of being alive. And he finished by saying that Archipelago is a very complex film and that he hoped we would also find it complex, which made us laugh, because he said he certainly did. And he said that these films that he made with Joanna Hogg stand alone in his mind. And after that, they all got up and left. So I don't know if they watched the film maybe from another place, or maybe they already know the film by heart and they did not need to watch it again. But they left, and then they came back after the film. So after the film, Tom spoke again and he answered questions from the festival people and from the audience, and Joanna Hogg as well. I don't remember every detail of every question that was asked. They only took 4 questions from the audience. They were asked which scene they liked best from Archipelago. I remember that. Tom said that he had at least 4 or 5, but particularly he liked the scenes in which the family was eating, the dinner scenes, and in particular, I think the one he selected was the one during which Edward wants to invite Rose over. Rose is the girl who cooks for them, so she's working, but there's always tension around the fact that Edward, so Tom's character, he is embarrassed about just treating her like some kind of servant. He actually wants to talk to her, so he chats with her, but the sister, Cynthia, kind of makes fun of him for that. So there's a lot of tension in that scene, and he explained that sometimes in those scenes he really did feel like Edward. You know, it was mostly improv, so he would steel himself up and he would, prepare himself for the scene and be like, I'm going to tell them. And then he would go into the scene feeling really combative and determined to drive the conversation. And in the end, he would just get dominated by the other cast members, just like Edward was dominated by his family. And he said it was funny because sometimes he had this kind of double consciousness where he felt frustrated as if he were Edward, but at the same time he was aware that this was working well for the movie, that it was funny. This kind of the way he would just get always dominated by everyone. And Joanna, I think, picked the art school discussion between Christopher the painter and Edward towards the end of the movie, where Christopher opens up about all the doubts that he had about being an artist and so on. And she said the scene was important to her because she did not want Christopher to end up looking too much like a guru character, which was a bit what he was. Like he always had these very spiritual scenes where he would talk about life and the meaning of life, and she wanted to show that he too had self-doubt and had to make difficult life choices and was not always certain about his life choices. So that's why she liked that scene particularly. Then someone asked Tom about the difference between playing a role in an intimate family drama like this and playing roles in big movies like Marvel movies. And well, it's a question he's been asked before, so I was not very surprised by his response, but he pointed out that, well, actually it was quite funny because he went directly from doing Archipelago to Thor. It was the film he made immediately after Archipelago. And obviously he said many things were different, but at the heart of the story it's still very much a family drama. He said, well, just like Edward, Loki is a son, he's also a brother, and these relationships are central to the story in the same way, whether it's Archipelago and you've got Edward with the absent father, the difficult relationship with his sister, or whether it is Loki, who obviously has a very complicated relationship with both his father and brother. So he said basically at their heart the stories are very similar. And then one more thing I remember from the discussion is that Joanna explained that all the cast members actually lived in the house, which is something I had already read somewhere, I think, or maybe in the commentary of the DVD, because I have the DVD and she says a lot of interesting things in the commentary. So she explained that they actually lived in that house, the house where they're supposed to be on holiday, except for those who were not part of the family, so the cook, Rose, and the artist, Christopher. And she said that the girl playing Rose, who was a non-professional actress, was actually quite frustrated because she was a very sociable girl and she enjoyed the company of the other actors, but she felt excluded from the group because she slept somewhere else. But actually that was exactly what she wanted. It worked very well for the movie. And she also joked that Tom obviously got the short end of the stick because he had to sleep in the attic room, which is tiny. So in the film it's played as a kind of joke, and to show also that Edward kind of always accepts the worst conditions to avoid creating conflict and never really stands up for himself. But obviously in real life Tom also had to put up with this really, really small room. So that's all I remember from the discussion. I'm sure there was more, but I did not write everything down, so sorry about that, but I hope you found that interesting anyway. And then at the end of the session, both Zawe and Tom got swarmed by fans who wanted autographs and selfies, and they happily obliged. Then Zawe left, and Tom continued to sign and take pictures outside the theatre, still inside the museum, the building of the Centre Pompidou, but it was outside the theatre. And I didn't try to get a picture because I don't really like being in crowds that sometimes go a bit crazy. At first it was pretty quiet. It was not a huge crowd also compared to what you can see at Comic Cons, because the theatre was not that big. So it was a rather privileged and almost intimate setting, but still there was quite a big crowd of people kind of pushing, and initially they were quiet, but then when they could feel that he had been there for quite a while and the security guys were getting a bit impatient, then people started pushing more because they felt that maybe they were going to miss their chance of getting their autograph or their picture. So it got a bit wild at the end, but Tom was always very nice and very polite, as he always is, and he tried to sign as much as he could, and then after a while he was just like, okay, now I have to go, sorry. So I just stood back. I was happy enough to watch and just take a few pictures of him while he was signing. Okay, so that's it. That's all I have to say about the event. I hope it was interesting to you, and well, I'm very happy that I was lucky enough to attend this. It was a very, very interesting event. I really enjoy Joanna Hogg's films. They're very special, but I think I prefer Unrelated to Archipelago, in fact, but both of them are interesting in their own way. So I'll stop there for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!